4 for a few minutes and then 3. Yeah.
She knows it's what past that.
Lily, yeah. She told me she could only stay for a little bit. You want to use my audio source for the poems? Is that easier for you? Hey everybody, this is Al Philreese, and I'm here at the Kelly Writers House at the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And this is an off-season live ModPo webcast, and we're really happy to be joined by, it looks like about 30 people who are watching the Facebook Live feed, and how many people are watching? And another 85 are watching the, what do we call it, KWH TV feed, which actually is a YouTube feed. So that's pretty good. That's 100 people, and we're very happy about that. So we have a group of people with us, and we're going to talk about 3 poems this afternoon, and we're very excited about it. Sitting to my left at the table here, back in Philadelphia, is the amazing Emily Harnett. Hello,
hey,
Emily.
Everyone.
Oh, there's applause. Oh, it's good to have you back. It is an easy crowd, but still, even easy crowds are elated when you show up.
I'm elated too.
Okay, great. Everything you say could be read sarcastically.
You said that before.
Are you elated?
Totally.
Okay. There she goes again. I don't know what to. On the other hand, someone who never seems to be ironic. No, that's not true either. And this is Anna Strong, sitting to my right.
Hi, everybody.
Yeah, there's more applause from Michael. And way over to the right, but actually to the far left in your hearts, is Lily Applebaum. Hello, Lily. Lily she has to leave early-ish, so probably after the Eileen Miles poem discussion, she's got to leave. And then Chris Mostaza, whose head you used to be able to see in this. There he is, Chris. Chris is going to be joining us at the table. We also have Michaela, who is handling the telephone. Hello, Michaela. There's Michaela. Hey, Michaela. Right. And, of course, we have Michael here in the room who's doing sketches. And Max McKenna. Can you hear me, Max?
I can now. Can
yeah,
you hear me?
Max, this is Michael, Max. Max is toying with the idea. I'm not sure we've decided this yet. Max and Erica are toying with the idea of using your sketches as the banner image for our Teacher Resource Center page, the TRC page, so that they're building. So you still thinking about doing that?
Yes, actually, Michael and I were in touch this week, and he was kind enough to send me some high-res scans of everything he had. So
you're going to go forward. The problem with that is that I look like, alternatively, sorry, I don't mean to criticize your mimesis, but sometimes I look like a clown. Sometimes I look like a circus barker, which is really what I am. Sometimes I look like a Unabomber. You know, it's just...
I sometimes I've just cropped you from the beard down, though, Al, so you can always see your face.
Thanks, Max.
Can I do my first Twitter poll question? Who does Al look like?
Oh, okay. We haven't even talked. I haven't even introduced everybody, and you're doing a Twitter poll already on something. That's a meta Twitter poll.
Exactly.
And so anyway, I want to introduce or reintroduce the 2 people. They're the reasons why we're having this off-season webcast, because Zach Gardner, who's here, of course, and there's Zach. He's going to say hello. Hey, Zach, can you get yourself there? Okay, he's trying. There's Zach. There's Zach. Lily thinks it's funny.
Pretty funny.
And Chris Martin. There's Chris. And these, for people who have joined us for ModPo webcasts before, you'll be familiar. All these people will be familiar. Maybe not Chris Mostaza, who's just joining us, and one more TA we're about to introduce. But we'd like to point out a couple of new things we're doing. We're going to be paying careful attention to Twitter. As usual, we're also going to be putting out some Twitter polls. So if you're following Twitter and you want to participate in those Twitter polls, basically just a question, so we can get a sense of what people think about certain questions. We're also going to be, as you know, for many of you, we're going to be broadcasting live through the Facebook group page. So you should be able to catch us there. And that means that there will be comments, lots and lots of comments, which we'll be able to look at. So, all right, so let me introduce people who've joined us by Google Hangouts. And way over to the right in the little boxes is Erica Kaufman, who is joining us, I believe, from Annandale-on-Hudson. Is that true, Erica? Good afternoon.
That is true. Hi, everyone.
Hey there, pal. It's good to see you. And next up, Yeah, it's great. Thanks for joining us. Next up is Max McKenna, who's joining us from Chicago, one of the original ModPo TAs. Hey, Max, how are you?
I'm good. How are you, Al?
Great, just great. And then way over to the end, at least from our view, joining us from, I think, from Massachusetts, from his new home in Massachusetts, is the amazing Dave Poplar. Hello, Dave.
Hey, Al. Hey, Al, everyone.
And finally, a new ModPo TA, but a veteran of our poetry community, let's just say, Jake Marmer, who's joining us from his deck out there in Palo Alto, California. Do you live in Palo Alto?
It's Stanford, actually.
You live in Stanford, California, that weird artificial place.
Yes.
But Jake is...
I am too artificial. Weird.
Jake is, as you'll get to know when you join us for the regular ModPo season, Jake is just a wonderful guy, an improv, let's just say an improv klezmer poet guy who really brings music to poetry and cares a lot about that end of the poetry community. I can't wait to hear what he has to say about Yach Blanc and the sound poem that we're going to be talking about in particular. And Jake will be joining us as a TA in the fall. And also, Jake is teaching ModPo, a modified version of ModPo, to his students at a special school in Palo Alto, California. And when we're visiting California in October, I haven't announced this, we're going to California. We're taking the show on the road. We're going to be doing a live webcast from the headquarters of Coursera in Mountain View, California. And then the next day, I hope, Jake, it's okay to announce this, we're going to be going to Jake's classroom and filming a live, collaborative, close reading of one of the ModPo poems with his students. Jake, are you still up for that?
I'm up for that. They don't know about it.
They don't know about you because they don't even know they're in your class, probably. But in any case, and then we're all going to San Francisco, and I think we're going to try to persuade Lily to come on this trip. We're going to San Francisco to the Center for the Book on that Saturday, and then we're going to Bolinas to do a special poem talk, and it's going to be great. Okay, so today what we're going to be doing is doing some close readings of 3 poems. I'm not sure how long these will take. We probably can't do a complete job on them. We're going to start with Eileen Miles' short poem, Writing. And I just want to say that we will all do our best to watch the comment feeds, to check Twitter, right? You're checking Twitter?
Yeah.
Okay. So since the ModPo site is not open, usually we're in there doing comment feeds, but we're not doing that. And we also are featuring for the very first time the Twitter feed on the screen. And for those of you who are working on iPhones and things like that, you probably can't read it very easily. But for those of you with big screens, you can. So we're very happy about all this. Thanks for joining us. So we're going to listen to Eileen Miles perform the poem called Writing. Eileen Miles was here at the Writers' House this spring as part of our Writers' House Fellows program, and this is a poem we talked about, and we've decided to add this poem to ModPo Plus, and we're very excited about it. And
And also the Teacher Resource Center.
And the Teacher Resource Center. Oh, cool. That's great. I don't mind saying that that the conversation we're about to have, a kind of a live version of the famous ModPo close readings around the table, except interactive. This will become edited, and then it, in turn, iteratively will join the resources in ModPo Plus and also Teacher Resource Center in special cases. So here we are. For those of you new to ModPo, this is all going to be confusing, but to veterans, here we are joining with the community again and actually creating new resources to add to the course. So we believe in this kind of weird poetic democracy. Okay, here is Eileen Miles reading Writing. We would encourage anyone reading Writing. We would encourage anyone to comment on this in Twitter or the Facebook stream, comment stream, or call us at 215-573-9752, and Michaela will answer the phone, and we'll go to your call when we have a chance. Here's Eileen Miles.
Like writing. I can connect any two things. That's God. Teeny piece of Band-Aid, little folded piece of Band-Aid. I ran to the bathroom to see my face. Sometimes I don't want to see my face in the mirror. Sometimes I can't bear my thoughts. Sometimes I can't do anything. But that's okay. Band-Aid, book, God. That's right.
What a poem. We're going to hear it again.
Writing. I can connect any two things. That's God. Teeny piece of Band-Aid, little folded piece of Band-Aid. I ran to the bathroom to see my face. Sometimes I don't want to see my face in the mirror. Sometimes I can't bear my thoughts. Sometimes I can't do anything. But that's okay. Band-Aid, book, God. That's right.
Okay,
Writing.
Oops, it's starting again. Let's start with the opening two lines. It's the opening 4 lines. I can connect any two things. Erica Kaufman, I can connect any two things. That's quite a statement. What's the tone of the statement? What do you think she's saying?
I think the tone is playful, and I kind of think that she's referring back to the title of the poem and how one of the amazing things about writing is that when you're writing, you're also thinking and you're discovering. So if you're writing, you can connect anything, and you don't always know that until it actually happens.
So writing as distinct from other human activities, like working with your hands in a physical world, you can't connect any two things. But in writing, you can. Can you say the obvious? What is it about writing that allows you to connect any two things? And what's the power of connection? I'm going to ask Erica that question and then also ask Max to add whatever he thinks.
Well, I mean, writing is you're putting words down on paper, and when things are next to each other, one might say that they're connected.
Mm-hmm.
Just purely the act of putting things into language is building connections. And connections is how we make sense of the world and how people think and relate to each other.
Mm-hmm. Max, you want to add anything to that?
Sure, I think it's important that it's any two things, right? I mean that speaks to the power of it, that you can take things that have no obvious relation and create the connection. And so I think that's kind of underscoring the importance of connection or connectivity or things that are things joining up somewhere in some kind of middle space. I also just love the line break too, right? I can break any two things, and then sort of the connection is that break, is the space between these two lines, or these two mini stanzas.
Oh, that's really great. Thanks, Max. I'm going to ask Lily to explain why she then says that's God. It's a very powerful moment. But before, while she's getting ready to say that, I want to ask Dave and Emily if you can give us some examples from the ModPo world, the ModPo syllabus, of any poems that we study, Dave and Emily, in which there is a connection of any two things, something remarkable in any of those poems. I can think of 3 or 4 just as I ask the question. So first, Lily, I can connect any two things. That's God. What's God-like about connecting any two things?
I think that she could be advocating for a kind of like, first it's godlike in the sense that she is the one who is creating the connection. So there's an element of creation and an element of all-knowingness, because she is the one who both knows and then creates what that connection is. Mm-hmm. But I think also there's a little bit of an element of like, there's a spirituality to writing that may not be connected to like a particular religion, but like there is a godliness maybe, or like a spirituality in that act of connecting two things.
Mm-hmm. So I think it was Erica who talked about the tone being playful. Erica, is it okay if we call this a kind of humble brag? In other words, she's saying, hey, look at me, I can connect any two things. But she's doing it, she's not like lording it over us, that power. She's more like saying, wow, I'm godlike. Yeah?
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. So Dave and Emily, the connecting of any two things, is that crucial to modern and contemporary poetry? Is it crucial to ModPo? Where do we see it otherwise?
In ModPo specifically?
Yeah, any ModPo poems.
Oh yeah, I can also think of tons. One of the first ones that came to me, just because it's one of the ones I've thought about most recently, is the Creeley poem, I Know a Man, which you connect a goddamn big car to a much larger cultural and metaphysical problem.
Okay, that's a good one. Let's go to Dave for one. Dave Poplar, a ModPo poem in which the poet can connect any two things?
Well, just on a basic level, when she's talking about connecting any two things, isn't she just talking about metaphor in general? And if we can look at almost every poem and we can find metaphors at work. I mean, look at every Emily Dickinson poem. There's great metaphors. Even some trees, there's great visual connections there. So I think it's hard to not find a poem where this is at work.
Okay, let's keep going with the poem. So once she's sort of made this humble brag and said, that's God, which I find to be a very powerful statement. It's like saying, that's nirvana, that's bliss, that's power, that's amazing. Then we get into this very seemingly domestic scene. Teeny piece of Band-Aid, little folded piece of Band-Aid. I ran to the bathroom to see my face. So we don't have to build a narrative, Anna, about this story. We don't have to do it. Yeah. But we kind of imagine that the poet or the speaker there's maybe a little cut or something, and she runs to the bathroom to see what's going on. Yeah? Okay. And then sometimes I don't want to see my face in the mirror. Sometimes I can't bear my thoughts. She's kind of moving on. Do you want to say anything about that passage?
I think what's so awesome, the awesome kind of power of this poem for me, is the fact that because she starts off with, I can connect any two things, and then does it, we completely remove like how well she connects those things from the equation. Yeah. It's not actually about like the value of like, well, did she actually connect these two things that well? That's no longer part of it. So like you said, we can build a narrative out of this. She's thinking I can connect any two things, like, here's a Band-Aid on my face. I don't want to see my face. Sometimes I think I look okay.
Yeah.
But it actually ultimately doesn't matter. The whole like meat of the poem is actually not what this poem is about.
Say more about that last statement.
The meat of the poem where the sort of like things are happening, where she's moving, where she's looking at her face, where she's got this little folded piece of Band-Aid, it's almost like filler just to remind us that she can connect any two things, and that's what she's doing. That's what this is.
And about. She's enacting the I can connect any two things. She's actually doing it right here for us.
Yep.
Okay. So Michaela, who do we have on the phone? Do you have a microphone? Because they can't hear you if you don't. Nothing happens without a microphone.
Is it on? Okay. Yep.
Yeah.
We have Philip Rexler from Austin, Texas.
Okay. Let's put Philip up on the phone, but then I'm going to read a couple of comments and ask everybody, including Philip, to respond. So bring him in. Michaela, is he in?
He's on.
Okay, we're getting Philip from Texas. Philip, are you in?
I'm here, Al.
Oh, hey, buddy. So what I'm going to do, Philip, if you don't mind waiting for a second, what I'm going to do is I'm going to read a few tweets and a few comments on the Facebook page, and then we can all take turns responding to any of those, and Philip will give you a chance. I know you had a question, but I'm preempting that. I'm going to ask you to comment.
I do have something specific to share, but I want to share it, but I'll comment on yours too, Al.
Okay. All right, so Greg Wass in the Facebook group writes, writing poetry is about the act of making connections and creating a reality. Indeed, the essence of creativity is making unexpected connections. I'm reminded of what Wallace Stevens said, after one has abandoned a belief in God, poetry is the essence which takes its place as life's redemption. The act of poetry is a sacred process, even in the small details of the world, such as a Band-Aid. That's right, Eileen Miles. And Muhammad Eggpel, and I'm sorry, Muhammad, for mispronouncing your name if I've done that, says it's like there's only one truth in the whole world, so everything's connected, which is getting to the whole question of God again. And Carol Stephen, a dear veteran of ModPo, is saying she lost the sound on Facebook. So she went over to KWH-TV. I don't know if others have had that experience. Jeremy Dixon, hello, Jeremy. Or is God a teeny piece of Band-Aid sticking two things together? Lily likes that, so she's going to comment on that. Sanjeev says, was thinking what Dave Poplar said, connecting any two things is a metaphor. Alana Shaw says, hello, Alana. says, love goddamn big car mention. T says, I can connect any two things. The I as a conduit, the speaker I as a conduit that allows two things to connect. Joy Rethke, whom I know from Los Angeles, writing on the page, we're God, at least for the moment. And I think that's it for now. So let's start with, Lily, you were nodding at one of those things. Let's start with you, then turn to Philip and see if anybody else has some comments. And then we want to get Jake Marmer in too.
Oh yeah, I just like what Jeremy said about God being the teeny piece of Band-Aid, or like, I think also he's just kind of picking up on the interesting juxtaposition between something really big and magnanimous and huge like God, counterposed with something like a teeny piece of Band-Aid, which is just like, I think of it as just like detritus that would be in like your purse or your pocket or something. But I think like, to me, this poem is kind of this, even though we said you don't have to read a narrative into it, I think of it as like being out somewhere or being somewhere and feeling a little bit anxious, because you definitely see the growing anxiety with the sometimes
checking your
stanzas.
face in the mirror is typically, at least for me, a very anxious activity.
Yeah, and so I think of like, something when you are feeling anxious, like finding something that grounds you. And so I think for her, she's kind of like finds this teeny piece of Band-Aid, and it reminds her all over again, like, I might be losing control, or I might not know what's going on, or I might my head might be reeling, and I can't stop my face from appearing in the mirror when I look into it, but I've got this like process that grounds me of connecting things like Band-Aid's book and God.
That's so great, Lily. And when we get to the end of the poem, we're going to be turning to what the poet does in these moments of anxiety. And we already know from the beginning what she's able to do, and then she's able to do it again. And by the way, at least in American English, Band-Aid is typically, like as in Band-Aid solution, is typically a negative, insufficient thing. That's the idiom, a Band-Aid solution. She may be saying there is only Band-Aid solutions. The Band-Aid solutions are what we do and how we connect. Okay, Philip, do you want to comment on any of the comments? And hello.
Oh yeah. A lot of them are very similar to what I have to say, especially that first one that you quoted, Al. And for Zach and Chris, y'all have got to work on this 30-second delay between video and audio, because it's blowing my absolute mind.
Are you watching on the Facebook?
Yeah, I'm watching on KWH TV. It's the first time I've ever actually watched and been on the phone at the same time, and it's blowing my mind right out the top of my head.
Well, we recommend that when anyone calls, that you turn off the sound, because that's like the old radio.
I don't have the sound on the computer. It's on the headphones over in the corner. I'm not listening to the sound at the same time. But it's still blowing my mind to watch a 30-second delay.
Yeah.
Anyway, this is one of those moments, Al, when the cosmic tumblers align, because I'm going to my book club tonight on Brene Brown's Rising Strong. And here's what she says in the last few sentences of the last chapter of the first chapter, under the subheading, Rising Strong is a spiritual practice. Storytelling and creating can be spiritual practices because they cultivate awareness. While these activities can be spiritual practices, it appears that rising strong after falling must be a spiritual practice. Rising demands the foundational beliefs of connection and requires wrestling with perspective, meaning, and purpose. I recently came across this quote on Liz Gilbert's Instagram feed, and I think this sums it up perfectly. Grace will take you places hustling can't.
Yeah, good. That's very good.
Well put.
Yes. Thank you so much. That's fantastic.
That's it.
Good. Thank you, Philip. Thanks for calling.
Okay.
Very good. Talk to you next time.
Bye.
Bye-bye. 215-573-9752. Jake Marmer, before we move to the next and final section of the poem, what do you have to say about any of this so far? And when you're writing poetry, I know that you can connect any two things because you're improvising most of the time.
Yeah, good call. I'm wondering, what are the two big things that Eileen Myles is connecting in this poem? and Anna sort of alluded to this. Maybe this moment of the narrator running into the bathroom and then just like watching her face in the mirror. Maybe that's an example of something that she's using to connect to seemingly disconnected things.
Yeah.
But I keep feeling like there's something bigger at play here, some other two big things that are being connected here, and I'm wondering what it is, whether it's the Band-Aid and God, or the metaphor and God, writing, and something of that caliber. The other thing I wanted to throw out there is I saw a comment by Coco on the Facebook feed, and she's asking about the written presentation of the piece, which I think is important here. Those little stanzas, just two-liner stanzas, that's how she starts. Max mentioned it. And then you really get, you're really aware when that changes, when the stanza becomes a three-liner, and three-liner grows and swells into kind of like longer stanzas. I think that's relevant here.
Yeah, good. Thank you, Jake. When I first read this poem and I saw Band-Aid book, I thought of, and my daughter, Hannah, is part of, or has been part of, an improv group, speaking of improv. And this is like a collegiate improv group where they go in front of an audience, and the audience shouts out two disconnected things, and they have to create a scene based on those. And so when I saw Band-Aid book, I thought, okay, Eileen Miles is sitting there, maybe feeling anxious, maybe the speaker is feeling anxious. The poem is called Writing. The question is, can she make a poem out of such a thing? And in a way, somebody in her head, the improv God inside the poet's head says, Band-Aid book, can you put those two together? And then she does. And of course, interestingly, in the second to last stanza, it's Band-Aid book, God, that's right. So let's move toward the toward the end.
At a party,
Frank O'Hara at a party being challenged to stand up at a typewriter table and just do something. I think there's something about that here, but more because it's a meta poem, because it's about writing. So Mike will get to you in a second. Yep. Okay. So sometimes I don't want to see my face in the mirror, anxiety. Sometimes I can't bear my thoughts, greater anxiety. Sometimes I can't do anything. So basically, her anxiety has caused her to be paralyzed. But that's okay. So let's look at but that's okay. Emily, be as simple, Emily and then Max, as simple as you can in that turn. Describe that turn, but that's okay. What's okay?
It seems that condition of anxious shame is okay, that humility is okay. It's also the humility that comes directly on the heels of this assertion, I can connect any two things. The humility is what leads her to this act of divine creation as she sees it.
Cool. Max, any thoughts on, but that's okay?
I mean, it's that classic sort of meta paradox that we encounter again and again, right? Where she says, "I can't do anything," right, as after she's done a lot of stuff, right? So it's humility, but it's also maybe tongue in cheek. It's sort of knowing, and I mean, it makes me think a little bit about the difference, reading this poem on the page versus hearing it out loud. Like, she blasts through when she reads it. You don't get the sense that anything is slowing her down. You don't get the sense that she is sort of like humbling herself in that moment. Whereas on the page, it is a little bit of a slower trickle. I think it's just one of those classic like meta paradoxes that we've seen many times.
Yeah, we have seen it many times. Anna Strong, what's the consolation of this anxiety? What comes of it? What productively can come of it?
This awesome poem.
This poem, but that's okay. Band-Aid,
it's the best
book,
consolation
God,
ever.
That's right. That's right.
I can still do
Instead
this.
of saying that's God, that's right.
Yeah, I can do this.
I can do this.
Yeah.
That's very cool. All right.
I think I don't know. I still am trying to figure out what to do with book. My sort of intuition is that we've got she builds up. Sometimes I don't want to see my face in the mirror. Like you said, anxiety, greatest anxiety. She builds up like 1, 2, 3, and then right before you feel like you're about to go over this edge of like existential crisis, we get that's okay.
Yeah.
And then I can do this. I've connected Band-Aid, this thing I was talking about before.
Yeah.
God, I was talking about before, through book, which is what she's produced, right?
Yeah.
Books of poems. Eileen she's published like 19 books of poems or something like that.
Yeah.
So there's this. That's right.
And that's right. It's so powerful.
Yeah.
Chris Wistaza has joined the table. Hello, Chris. So what I'd like to do is go around and get really quick final words on this poem by Eileen Miles called Writing, a meta poem, and say anything that needs to be said. Emily, you're first. Final thought.
Yeah, I'm just looking at That's Right, and that is a kind of perfect, well, two things that she's connected and a perfect way of concluding this poem, and that it's a part of the poem, but it's also looking back and reflecting on her poem. That's right. The thing that's right is this this particular poem that she's written, and this poetics, this kind of mission statement of hers as a poet, and and it really dovetails with the way we talk about poetry generally in this class.
Cool. Anna, final thoughts?
It doesn't seem like it goes anywhere, and yet it goes so many places. Reminds me of Emily Dickinson kind of in that way. We don't actually travel beyond the bounds of these lines, and yet we've got these, incredible vacillations in, the sort of pride and playfulness at the beginning to the huge anxiety of the middle to the, like, kind of sigh of relief at the end. I love this poem.
Very cool. Chris Wistaza, final thought?
I like to think of the I as the reader of the poem too, in addition to the poet, because after you read the poem and you move through the disjuncture, you say to yourself, "Wait a minute, I can connect any two things."
And we have to, and we have to. Really well said, Dave Poplar. Final thoughts?
I see this poem as a big grouping of pairs, and obviously I was primed to see that from the beginning. Teeny piece of Band-Aid, little folded piece of Band-Aid. I ran to the bathroom to see my face. Sometimes I don't want to see my face in the mirror. Sometimes I can't bear my thoughts. Sometimes I can't do anything. Those things are pairs. And I like how that leads to, but that's okay. And then at the very end, that's right. It's as if she's saying, all these things that may not be connected are connected. I can connect them. Yeah. That's right.
That's right. I think we can read That's Right in so many ways, Dave. And one is just a slap to the forehead. Oh, wait a minute. I could click my heels 3 times anywhere and go back to the home of the poem. Like I had it in my power all along. And
Exactly.
anxiety turns out to be a kind of gateway to this. Magdalena Brzezinska, who's joined us in the Facebook group feed, writes, anxiety connecting one meaning us, to the act of creation. Interesting.
And T tweeted also, hearing Miles read, that's okay, that's right, is self-awareness, but also self-assurance, which gives me comfort.
Yeah.
That's so great.
Oh, that's very good. Okay, yes, so Jake Marmer, final thoughts on this?
I don't think it's a definition poem, meaning here's what I think writing is. I think it's very much a process poem, and maybe because, we've been throwing around the word improvisation a lot, it feels to me like she sat down and the process was happening. I can't connect any two things. Here's me sitting down to write, and in the moment of writing, here's how it unfolds.
Yeah.
In other words, she didn't set out to define what writing is. She sat down to write.
She sat down to write. We had Eileen Miles here this spring, and one of the things I think we all realized was she stood for this idea that when you sit down to write a poem about content, you might be able to do it, or you might not. But if you sit down to write, you will be able to do it, because the worst, and indeed the best, is to be able to write about the fact that you're having anxiety about writing, and then you've written, and that's right. That's all you need. And that's not only the power of improvisation, but the power of believing in yoking dissimilar things and producing a third thing which is not the same as those two things. And that is the result of that improvisation. And Chris Mustaza is right. We have to actually figure out, okay, Band-Aid book, what's the connection there? Oh, we've done it. We do it too. Okay, Max McKenna, final thoughts.
It reminds me of the Wheelbarrow poem by Williams a lot because of the way it looks, but also because of what it's doing. I don't think that it's quite this. I don't think that's quite a poem of accretion. It's not this these clauses depending on each other, but rather it's something more lateral. But the idea is the same. I think that she's kind of putting things together. Maybe not in such a clear vertical way, but more horizontal way. Although the shape of the poem on the page would lead you to think that it's sort of vertical.
Well put. Before we turn to Erica for final word, just to cite some people on the Facebook page. Mariah Zilberberg writes, as Joan Didion says, and I paraphrase, I write to find out what I'm thinking. Yes. Meredith Lederer, one of our community TAs, writes, write, R-I-G-H-T, equals write, W-R-I-T-E. And that was kind of implicit in our conversation, but I don't think anybody spelled that out. So thank you, Meredith. And Dave Poplar's mom, Eleanor, writes, I agree with Max. You know, she didn't say I agree with Dave. I agree with Max. The poet's speaking this poem produces a different result than the reading of it. She performs with a sort of cockiness, knowing she can get through the day. Yeah. She has the godlike power of creation after all. Dave, you're a chip off the old block, I guess.
Yeah, I can't hold a candle to her, but
she is great. Eleanor, hello. Welcome back to ModPo. And finally, Erica Kaufman, final word on this poem before we move to the next one. Erica?
Yeah.
Final thoughts?
Final thoughts. I love this poem so much, and it feels very much like a manifesto poem to me, but not just a manifesto about writing. It reminds me of like the things that I wish I could actually remember to say when I'm working with teachers or when I'm working with my own students, which is that you have to just let yourself make the connections that you make as a reader or a writer.
Yeah.
Or as a reader of poetry, you can't necessarily go in thinking that there's one exact meaning. You have to open yourself to the different connections that you make through the act of engaging with the poem.
That is such a great way to end this conversation about this poem. And I think it is. This poem has the potential to be one of those anthemic ModPo poems, a poem that really tells us a lot about what we do and what we stand for and what we like. All right, so I'd like to move to the Yach Blanc sound poem. And I'm going to ask everybody we're going to be quick about this, even though Yach Blanc deserves, all the time in the world. In a way, it's a poem that you can kind of get fairly quickly. So I do want to make quick work of it. And then we will turn to the third poem, which is Yolanda Wisher's poem, which is a little more complicated. So 215-573-9752, and Eric has joined us in the room. Hello, Eric. And here comes Yach Blanc.
Was at this conference seance in CalArts in Los Angeles, and
don't worry about not understanding this
I met
intro.
this writer, Madeline Gins, and I would like to present a short meditation on the title of one of her books.
So what he said so far is, he was in this room at the Writer's House actually performing this, and he said, I was at a conference not too long ago, and I met Madeline Gins, and I'd like to, in honor of her, I'd like to perform a riffing on the title of one of her books, and here it is.
What the President will say and do. 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 What the President will say and do.
And applause. I was one of those applauding.
Thank you.
That's Yach Blanc here at the Writer's House doing What the President Will Say and Do. Anna, overall, what's he doing there? What's happening?
Do I have to know that? I have no idea.
You have no idea? Okay. Well, we'll come back to you
Well,
then.
I love the.
What's he doing? Oh, good. You haven't thought about this.
I've been trying to think about it. I've
Okay.
listened to it like once a day for the last 3 days, trying to get ready for this.
Okay.
And I still don't know.
Okay. Well, we can come back to you.
Okay, yeah, come back.
Yeah. All right. Emily, what's he doing?
Yeah, well, what the president will say and do, what those words describe, is the most authoritative kind of speech available, the speech of actual authority of the president. And he's deconstructing the sound of that speech. His speech loses authority in a way that critiques, or we could imagine critiquing the model of authoritative speech that those...
Authoritative speech. The president, presumably the president of the United States, is saying, when the president says something, what is the president saying in effect?
When the president is saying he's speaking the truth, he's speaking his own authority. It's
the very speech is the speech of authority. The president lays authority on speech. And Chris, that kind of speech is coherent and it makes sense, although there's a chance of electing a president who won't make a lot of sense, so we need to have Yach Blanc come back. But anyway, what's being said? What's going on here?
I mean, it seems to me like it's a kind of meditation on the idea of expressivity in a way, because even when the language breaks down, like as the sort of authenticity of what the president is saying breaks down, you still get a sense of meaning from the way he expresses that breakdown. Like you actually can feel the frustration coming through in a way.
Yeah, to say the least. Jake Marmer, you care a lot about the sound of poetry. This is not a poem that's been written down. It's just a phrase that's being uttered. It depends on the performance, I guess you could say. Any thoughts on this?
Yeah. Well, clearly you have a theme and variation going on here, right?
Theme
so
and
you have the
variation,
sentence,
yes.
And then there are the variations. And what's interesting is where these variations are going, the trajectory, right, of the piece. And the way the trajectory is that it seems like the vowels are basically getting sucked out of the piece.
Right.
Right. So like it's mostly all consonants towards the end, and then even that, and then there are like little mini themes that are starting to get thrown in there. I don't know on purpose or not, or whether that even matters. But then there's like enda, right? That becomes sort of like a new word, and sand, or like all these things are like in there, and I think like this like removal of vowels is kind of powerful. Vowels there, like the singing, the life.
Removal of vowels. Yeah. In a way, what's happening there, Jake, is that Yach Blanc is swallowing the vowels and choking on the consonants, right? At the end.
Consonants.
At the end, right?
Or the consonants.
And at the end, there's this choking sound. All you hear is, I can't do it. He's quite a performer. So one chokes on what once were authoritative words. And one of the ModPo themes, I don't have a mug, but I have a cup. One of the ModPo themes is essentially, what the language will say and do. What the language will say and do. Cup, glass, this is it, right? The denotative action, the indexical action makes things work. Things work. And when you begin to feel less and less like the authority of the president's speech works to describe the actual world that we live in, which is not being described by what the president says and does, you have an artist, a poet, a sound poet come and deconstruct that to the point where it just sounds like mumbling garbage, nothing. Yeah. And that's more denotative than the authoritative speech. Max, what would you say about this? Do you like this, Max?
Yeah, I like it okay enough. It's entertaining, and I think it's either Jake or Dave said something a moment ago. about. No, actually, sorry, I think it was Chris. It gets better the more it falls apart, right? Which I think is really telling. I think otherwise it sort of seems a little obvious. But I don't know necessarily that like it is kind of a critique on authoritative speech of, say, a presidential figure, I suppose. But I think it also is working a lot with the idea that, like, at least for the last, like, since Nixon or Gerald Ford, a lot of people have kind of considered the president to be a buffoon. Like, all of them are sort of buffoons in a way. And so it's really, like, it's very playful in that respect, and it's really working with that idea. So I don't know how much of a critique it is of, like, presidential power so much as it is just this kind of, like, we all sort of know already the president is a buffoon and he'll say and do whatever.
Well, I think that's a really important historical context, because Madeline Gins wrote this piece, the original piece, in, I believe, 1973. I might be wrong. But that's Nixon, right? And so we were all saying, whatever the president says is a lie, and so, talk to the hand. There's really nothing going on there. But that was a fairly new idea, right? Because the authority of presidential speech, even when we had doubts, was thought of as authority. It's the end and be-all of linguistic authority, right? And every child in the United States learns the power of the authority of words in, say, the Gettysburg Address, which completely crystallizes Walt Whitman, who was very hopeful about American language, and even William Carlos Williams, very hopeful about American language. This Madeline Gins thing comes to the point where we're less hopeful about American language, and the connection between saying and doing is never there, and he pulls it apart. T. de los Reyes says, the more the language disintegrates, the more it has weight, which is a ModPo kind of anthem, right? A ModPo slogan is, going back to Gertrude Stein, when the language begins to break apart or be broken apart, it has more gravity. So it is interesting. Can we get the portable mic to Eric to see if he has a comment? And let's go to Erica Kaufman for a thought on this. What do you think?
Wasn't it Cage who said he wanted to make English less understandable?
Yes.
Isn't that Cage?
John Cage, he went around the country trying to make English less understandable, because when it's understandable, we begin to do things bad to people. We begin to hurt people with the language. So, in effect, he says he was demilitarizing the language. I think that's a cousin to this gesture. Sure. Erica Kaufman, your thoughts on Yach Blanc?
I mean, I think that you just said what I was going to say. I'm getting that echo. But I'm thinking about, again, Cage, and also the idea of the way that you can use your voice in order to make new sounds and reassert ownership over language.
Yeah, I think Karen Elenia says the same thing in her Twitter comment. And she says that Blanc reminds her of what it was like when she first read Stein. Makes her uneasy, but it's a kind of starting over.
The same as Tracy Morris, too.
Yes, many people have mentioned Tracy Morris here. Yeah. For those of you who are new to ModPo, Tracy Morris is someone we encounter, who's really a musical poet, a sound poet. We encounter her in week 10 at the very end of the course, and she seeks to break down standard phrases. Right. Exactly the same way, actually. Eric, your thought on this?
I think this kind of poem is open enough to really allow room for imaginative suggestion. I have a very strong imaginative response to this, which is a kind of very short Beckett play or a very short Pinter play, where you get the sense that someone's just turned to our own correspondent to find out what the president will say or do. And that correspondent reaches a really deep crisis of humanity. Like, what would it be for me to say this? So instead of being able to say it, the whole process breaks down, and he muffles himself or herself into the point where language doesn't quite exist anymore. And this grunt, like, am I free? What is this? What can I do with this situation? And there's this kind of political repression built into it because of the way information is managed and processed and regurgitated. And there's some deep part of the speaker that's saying, no, you won't do that. You'd rather bark like a dog.
Right.
And that's my response. That's not necessarily anything to do with something that's always in the poem for every reader, but the poem left enough room for me to do that work.
That's very well put. A couple of comments from the Facebook page, and then we'll move on to our third and final poem. Rakhana Bave, and I'm sorry, Rakhana, if I'm mispronouncing your name. I agree with what Al said, but I also wonder if it could reflect the sentiment of the audience, citizens, and not the president, where people questioning what the president will say and do are slowly and consistently being stifled until one would think they are delirious, a sort of reflection on the political situation in a lot of countries. Basically, we wind up choking on our own civic discourse. Misty Coper writes, hello, Misty. When you can still understand Yach Blanc, he places great emphasis on say and do. They are separate things. They're disparate. And of course, at the end, they're the same. That's a good point. And Vandana Basin says, well, for me, this is a completely new form of poem I have learned today. It's interesting. This is what we hope in ModPo, that people will think, is this a poem? Is this performance guy a poet? And Jim Bumgarner, hello, Jim. Welcome back. I think the discussion regarding reader technique misses the point of the poem. Wow, and he didn't elaborate, so I'm not sure what, but maybe he can say more. So we're going to listen to the very end of the poem again and then move on to the next poem.
What the president will send, 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 what the president will send.
When language has been corrupted, right, when it has been completely corrupted, it's wrong, say experimental poets, say many of the ModPo poets, it's wrong to reproduce traditional ways of meaning. If language has been emptied of its sense, if language doesn't work anymore, if language is full of lies, of social lies, then how dare we construct a poetry that pretends as if the language is intact and meaning-making is working. That's just the most basic way to think about this. And he's performing an extreme version of, physically hard to do, I've seen him do this, of the performance of language's implosion inside the mouth and inside the throat, to the point where the meaninglessness of political discourse prevents us from even saying it. And that is a political critique. So here we have a musical poet who's putting on what is, I mean, and Max was right in describing that history. It's to the point, as Max pointed out, that we all know. It's kind of a cliche that political speech is empty. But here he is kind of performing it in a way like, you know, this is a season in which political speech, not just Donald Trump. So I said Donald Trump in a ModPo webcast today. Not just Donald Trump, but particularly Donald Trump. Of course, everybody knows, even his supporters say, well, he doesn't mean any of that. And he's not trying to say truthful things. He's just talking, and I kind of like that freedom. Well, I think Yach Blanc is saying more or less the opposite, that if you really listen to that kind of political speech, you're going to hear someone choking almost to death on political discourse. All right, so we're going to go to the third poem, and this is by Yolanda Wisher, who is a Philadelphia poet and a friend of the Writers' House, and currently the poet laureate of the city of Philadelphia. We're very pleased, and we're excited to add this poem to ModPo Plus. And I'm not really sure where to add it, So for those veterans of ModPo, I hope you will post to Twitter or to the Facebook group and tell us where we should add it. That's going to be an interesting question. Maybe you can, I don't know how a Twitter poll can be constructed in that way, but maybe you can do that. We don't yet have a recording of Yolanda performing this poem, but we're going to ask her to do it. I'm sure she'd be happy to do it. It's from a book that I have just finished reading. It's called Monk Eats an Afro. Monk meaning Thelonious Monk. Monk eats an afro. And this is called From Imhotep's Kundalini. And here we go. I'm going to read it. I'm going to do a bad job reading it, but believe me, at some point soon we'll replace my reading of it with Yolanda's. Here we go. What thoughts I have of you tonight, Du Bois, of bodies rocked and minds embalmed in bark. Our blanched arrival, I said blanched, it could be just blanched. Our blanched arrival seethen with scandal's mark. Nowadays I peep you in the bean pie seller's poise. With that silhouette fit for bust or cameo, I can't always divine your debonair birth or your buku brain laborin' like an earth in hallelujah's ether, somehow duckin' death's blow. Sure sprung from Imhotep's Kundalini, stitchin' white reconstruction's funeral shroud, scriptin' Philly, as in Philadelphia, scriptin' Philly dirges for the crying out loud, cussin' Garvey's name over martinis. Sometimes I wonder if you double agent on the page or mastermind our ordered rage. Whoa. All right, we have not talked about this poem. I don't know how much preparation anybody has done. Emily, as usual, has taken no notes. All right. Dave Poplar, Imhotep, did you look it up?
Yeah, he was an Egyptian who was considered the first, one of the very first architects and engineers, and I believe I read that he was even almost canonized after he died. He was very, very influential and responsible for one of the very famous pyramids.
Great. And he was also, he was the chancellor, basically, to the pharaoh, right-hand person, chief advisor. But he also was born a commoner, and probably the only one in that position ever to have been born a commoner. Okay, let's see. Max, did you look up Kundalini?
I was just looking it up right as you asked me.
No, that's okay. That's fine. Who looked up Kundalini? Anna, did you look up Kundalini? You didn't?
I did, but I lost
I have it in front of me, Al, if you'd like.
Go ahead. Let's hear it.
Kundalini in yogic theory is a primal energy or Shakti located at the base of the spine.
Good. It's coiled. It's said to be. We needed Molly here. It's said to be coiled at the spine, and it has great potential to be released through the body. So it's Imhotep's Kundalini as his essential yogic energy. Okay, we don't know what that means. It's a phrase that happens in the poem, but we don't know what that means. Okay, first line, Erica Kaufman. It's an echo of a famous ModPo line. Yes, Erica Kaufman?
Yep. Ginsberg.
Ginsberg, which one?
Supermarket in California.
Okay, supermarket in California. Yeah, it's the first line, right? It's what thoughts I have of you tonight, Walt Whitman.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so Erica, see if you can riff this. So Walt Whitman, Allen Ginsberg is to Walt Whitman as Yolanda Wisher is to W.E.B. Du Bois. Can we do anything with that ratio?
Well, I mean, I think that it's thinking about a sense of lineage and a sense of history in writing.
Yes. So in the case of Ginsberg, he's seeking encouragement from Whitman, who was like, as he was in the supermarket, isolated, marginalized, gay poets, and he's thought of as an encourager. In the case of Yolanda Wisher trying to channel Du Bois, it's complicated. How is it complicated? Chris Mostaza, any thoughts on that?
Well, I guess I was thinking about the idea of like double consciousness from the Souls of Black Folk,
And we know that's in the poem because there's a reference to it later, isn't there?
Right, double agent.
The double agent. Du Bois is in a way a double agent in African American politics and culture. I'm sorry to put you on the spot. Can you summarize in a sentence what that double agency is?
The idea of double consciousness, or the fact that you view yourself both through the eyes of a primarily like white majority, as well as through the eyes of your own heritage at the same time.
Mm-hmm. And double agent is a powerful phrase that suggests, Emily?
It suggests something traitorous on the one hand,
Right.
An ambivalent relationship to a particular demographic, a particular heritage.
Right. All right. Let's look at the prosody for a second. Okay, I'm going to read the first couple lines. Anna Strong, how are you doing on prosody these days?
Let's see how it goes.
Okay. What thoughts
Try
I
me.
have of you tonight, Du Bois, because I'm really doing it.
Thanks.
Right. Yeah. Something that is,
just
that
tee it up for
doesn't
me.
love a wall, making Frost's non-iambic line into an iambic line. I just gave it to you. What thoughts I have of you tonight, Du Bois. How many beats?
5.
5. Is that important?
Yes.
Yeah, how so?
Because 5 lines is a traditional iambic
Not
line.
lines.
5 beats.
5 beats in a line is...
Iambic.
No, an iamb is a single foot.
Oh, yeah.
Right? I have of you tonight. It's a single iamb. When you have 5 of them, what's it called?
Iambic
Emily Harnett, Masters,
Oh, God.
MA from Yale University. Oh, my goodness. Eric, it's iambic pentameter, says Chris Mustaza. Okay, iambic pentameter. And Jake Marmer, I know you don't do iambic pentameter in your poetry.
Yeah.
However, what's iambic pentameter associated with when it's used?
Well, classic.
Classic, that's a nice
rhyme,
evasive word.
ballads,
Yes.
and obviously sonnets, which
Yes,
is
sonnets,
weird.
Shakespearean sonnets of what thoughts I have of you tonight, Du Bois, of bodies rocked and minds embalmed in bark.
Wait, there's 14 lines.
There's 14 lines in this poem, and it's rhymed. A, B, B, A. C, D, D, C. Cameo, birth, earth, blow. C, D, D, C. E, F, F, E. Kundalini, shroud, loud, martinis. Kundalini, martinis. E, F, F, E. And then G, G, the couplet at the end. So it is it an Italian or Petrarchan sonnet or a Shakespearean or Elizabethan sonnet?
Is it any of those?
Well, it is more like a Shakespearean or Elizabethan sonnet in that it's 3 quatrains and then a rhyming couplet. It's different in that a classic Shakespearean sonnet or Elizabethan sonnet is A-B-A-B, not A-B-B-A. So it's it's a somewhat modified Shakespearean sonnet. Okay, now, Max, or anyone, Max and Anna, we have Yolanda Wisher grappling Ginsberg-like with Du Bois, writing a Shakespearean sonnet with iambic pentameter, double agency. Who wants to say something? Max, are you ready to just deal in a general way with what Yolanda Wisher is trying to do here?
Well, it doesn't seem to add up, right? That's I think
doesn't
that's
seem
what
to
we're
add
supposed
up.
to,
Yep.
supposed to get from it. It's she's writing in this very strict form, trying to do something that's potentially more radical, right? So there's some kind of tension there that we need to pick apart.
So in the language, it's not Shakespearean language, right? Or your buku brain laboring like an earth in hallelujah's ether, somehow ducking death's blow. By the way, death's blow, Chris Mustaza, death's blow. Uh-oh, anybody? It's a ModPo poem, Death's Blow. Death's Blow, Claude McKay.
If we must die.
If we must die. So we got McKay, who's calling for revolution in a sonnet. This is a ModPo poem. Now we have Yolanda Wisher doing a sonnet, maybe using the same Trojan horse strategy that Claude McKay used, maybe against Du Bois, or trying to point out the double agency of Du Bois. There's a lot of people stroking their chins. Can we get the portable mic to Eric? And meanwhile, Emily, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, it just
you like
seems.
this?
Yeah, it's complicated, right? And all of us are scratching our heads about it. But I think, and I don't want to mischaracterize the Claude McKay because I don't, it's not in front of me. But it seems that this is revisiting those themes and maybe doing them a little bit more effectively, or tipping the sonnet form on its head and using the sonnet form to talk about something like double agency in a kind of complex and contradictory identity, and a complex and contradictory relationship to a kind of literary patrilineage that Du Bois is implicated in here.
And somehow ducking, as in ducking, avoiding, somehow ducking death's blow, sure sprung from Imhotep's Kundalini. Is it that the ability to avoid the consequence of Black Revolution is the fate of Du Bois with his relatively genteel philosophy of existing as an African American in the culture, which goes along with the seemingly safe sonnet, somehow ducking death's blow, sure sprung from the not yet uncoiled yogic primal energy of the common-born chancellor, the second in command. It's quite an interesting thing. Who was I? Oh, it was Eric who was going to say something. Eric?
I think Kundalini is
Right
something
up to the mic.
Kundalini is something that Ginsberg plays with a lot too. It's a word that she finds there. Ginsberg and the beats and that language that we think about as being so open and almost Whitmanian, she's picking up on the fact, I think, that the beats are listening all the time to jazz, and she's found a way to invert the interior sonic music of this sonnet to, instead of where Claude McKay is playing a very Anglophile sonic register, Yolanda is claiming back the African American musical roots and giving us back the beats as a Black sound that both accounts for the use of traditional forms, which I think many, not all, but many African American poets have been, especially during the Harlem Renaissance, thought of as playing a kind of aesthetically safe game to some extent.
In the case of McKay and County Cullen and a few others.
Absolutely. And Yolanda's saying, well, look, we can still see how this form, this European form that Shakespeare is using, if we handle it just right, really renders up this great African-American jazz tradition, which was so central in bringing the beats and Whitmanian language back to the sound of American poetry.
That's brilliant. That's so well said and well synthesized. We're going to continue for a few more minutes on this poem, which is exciting, and this is classic ModPo for those watching. We've not prepared this. We're looking at something fresh, and we're making something of it, and we're hoping that everybody kind of works along with us. A program note: in about 4 minutes, there's a 90-minute limit on the Facebook Live video. Is that correct, guys? So the Facebook Live video that many of you are watching, let's see how many, is going to cut out in about 4 minutes. And those of you who want to continue watching, there are now 54 viewers. There are 54 people on that one who will, in order to watch the rest of it, should switch over to KWH TV. And the way to do that is to go to the Kelly Writers House website and look for KWH TV on that site and click that. And you'll get it. So we're gonna go another 4 minutes with you, and then we're gonna continue, and we hope you'll join us. And we are really enjoying the discussion here in Twitter and the Facebook feed. So keep talking. Okay, so I'm gonna quote the last 2 lines, and I'm gonna go around and give everybody a chance to say one thing about this poem, either about the last 2 lines or really what Yolanda Wisher is doing. And anyone who wants to suggest where in ModPo this poem, where in ModPo Plus, which week it belongs in, for new members of the ModPo community, obviously you won't be able to do that because you haven't seen the course yet. But for veterans, where does this go? How does it fit? I think it's a very interesting question. Okay.
Suggest some possibilities for my Twitter poll.
Oh, well, that will come. Yeah, all right. The chapter in which we encounter Claude McKay and County Cullen, and really the spirit of W.E.B. Du Bois is, of course, chapter 3. Sorry, 4. Chapter 3 is the Communist Poets. Chapter 4. But what are some options? Right? We could put it parallel to the Supermarket in California poet, where Ginsberg seeks encouragement from a predecessor. That's another option. But there are other places. I'll read the last 2 lines, and we'll go around. We'll start with Dave Poplar, and then go to Jake Marmer, and so on. Sometimes I wonder if you, double agent on the page, or mastermind of our ordered rage. It's pretty heavy stuff. Dave Poplar, can you do anything with those last 2 lines, or say anything about the poem?
Here's a thought. What about W.E.B. Du Bois as a sonnet himself? He had a very formalistic, traditional background, but at the same time, he's still an outsider. And I think this sonnet shows the conflict using terms like buku, brain, laborin, things like that, where those are outsider slang terms still in this very traditional, formalistic format, and it ultimately ends with being an ordered rage. It's almost about to burst. It just doesn't work that well. So in a sense, W.E.B. Du Bois himself may be a sonnet.
That's great. Ordered rage, Dave. Ordered rage. It's a paradox, right?
Very much so.
Mm-hmm. And is this sonnet an ordered rage?
I think you can look at it that way because of the language. If you look, there's so much slang, seethin with Scandal's mark. Nowadays, there's these slangy terms. There's no capitalization. There's no punctuation.
So Yolanda Wisher is expressing frustration, possibly anger, possibly revolutionary anger within the sonnet. And basically,
Yolanda Wisher is also a graduate of Lafayette College, my alma mater. Just wanted to put that out there. Meaning that's
just one of those fun facts.
Just one of those fun facts. Yeah.
Jake Marmer. So you've never written a sonnet, I'll bet.
In fact, I have. I took a prosody course, graduate school.
And were you very happy and comfortable and feeling happily confined inside the sonnet? Somehow I doubt that.
Yeah, well, it's a challenging but wonderful form. I keep thinking about Imhotep's Kundalini. Like, what does that actually mean, or does it at all mean anything? I mean, from my yoga classes, I remember Kundalini is like has something to do with subconscious, right? So it's like the potential, right? The dark energy. So it's the kind of like the subconscious energy of this architect, maybe an intuitive hope for structure, or something like that, which kind of echoes the idea of ordered rage. This desire to make rage ordered, and orderly and organizable.
That's really good, Jake. And the mastermind, the accusation that he is the mastermind of this, it has a mostly negative connotation. Like you put us in this position with your powerful theories of race in America. You're the mastermind. You're why I'm stuck inside this sonnet. Max McKenna, thought about the last line, or maybe about where this fits in ModPo, or any of this?
It's such a confounding ending, and it doesn't function like the turn of a sonnet ought to, and that it refuses to resolve one way or the other, and it sort of remains a double agent until the end. And I can't quite make sense of it. I can't tell if being a double agent on the page is a good or a bad thing. It seems to be that she's accusing Du Bois of this, but then again, like, double agency can also be a means of subversion and also a kind of radical political action in itself, right? Ordered rage. that seems to be a bad thing, right? As a paradox. But then again, I don't know if making art out of rage, that it has also some kind of political effect, potentially, in its ordering. I don't know. It's tricky because it doesn't really go one way or the other, and maybe that's really where the full force of this comes from, is that it really is this subverted sonnet because it refuses to resolve. It doesn't turn so much as it just kind of turns you around, really.
That's well said. Wisher's, or the speaker's, anger is clearest perhaps in the third stanza, just after we hear the speaker describe Du Bois as having avoided death, the death that might come if you're a revolutionary in response to the racist hatred of the situation, and that that duckin sure springs from the primal energy, stitching white reconstructions, funeral shrouds, so that the duckin, the act of duckin, to mix the metaphor, is the thing that actually weaves the shroud, that scripts, that writes, that bespeaks dirges, Philadelphia dirges, right, over deaths, presumably in the black community, for the crying out loud, which is a pun, crying out loud meaning the crying at a funeral in Philly, but crying out loud, of course, exasperated for crying out loud, while cussing, meaning cursing, Garvey, Marcus Garvey, whose response to the situation at the beginning of the 20th century was to suggest that perhaps black Americans should migrate back to Liberia, I think, right? Liberia. So Garveyism is this radical separation. Cussing Garvey's name. Who would cuss Garvey's name? W.E.B. Du Bois, who was much more an integrationist, over martinis. So cussing Garvey over martinis suggests that Du Bois is off having martinis while all this bad stuff is going down. Then the last couplet. Sometimes I wonder if you double agent on the page, if you are a double agent on the page, or alternatively, the mastermind of where I'm stuck literarily. So this is really, Erica Kaufman, can you shed some light on any of this? How are you doing?
I've never read this poem before we were, and I've actually never read Yolanda Wisher's work before, and I love this poem. I think it's a fabulous, fascinating, really hard poem.
Can you say what some of the things that you love about it?
Well, you just said, I've been thinking a lot about the Du Bois-Garvey juxtaposition, and how that goes back to, the two of them being on somewhat opposite poles in terms of their theories about race relations. And then I'm also thinking back to Dave Poplar's amazing idea that maybe Du Bois is a sonnet himself, which makes a lot of sense to me given the movement of the poem. And then I'm also, I kind of live in yoga land, so if I could be totally wrong, but I think that the Kundalini, it's in your spine and it feels like electric, and it's supposed to help you get enlightenment. Anybody know if that's...
Yeah, that's according to the definition that I read. That's right.
Yeah, so all of these things are kind of swirling around in my head together, and making me wonder if this poem is in its own way sort of a search for enlightenment of some kind, or a quest to make sense out of what one can't quite make sense of. Yeah,
that's really well put. Anthony Risser, who tweets as neuropsychology, quotes cussing Garvey's name over martinis and says puts us in mind of Langston Hughes' Dinner Guest Me, which is a poem we deal with in ModPo. I think that's a really great suggestion. Chris, a final thought on this, or idea about where it fits in ModPo or anything?
Sure. I mean, the poem itself, its consciousness seems to move back and forth between Africa and America. You have the idea of Imhotep. I read the second line of bodies rocked and minds embalmed in bark as a kind of maybe referencing the Middle Passage in a way. And then you have the Garvey back to Africa. So it felt like the poem itself is like enacting this double consciousness in a way.
That's really well put and good context. Thank you. Anna Strong, your thought?
Do I get to say anything? Do I get to say anything?
Yeah.
The thing that I sort of thought that I keep coming back to is the sort of way that this poem positions itself in terms of its inheritance, in the sense that the way that she's immediately positioning herself in relationship to Ginsberg and then Du Bois, and then dealing with all of the various, I guess, references, sort of identification moments she sort of brings in from all of these different disparate elements of culture and whatever, to me means that, no poetic inheritance is uncomplicated.
Yes.
There's no direct lineage from like Ginsberg to Whitman.
No poetic inheritance is uncomplicated.
Yeah.
That's it. Yeah, right?
There's one thing, Al, that
Wait. Eric doesn't have a mic. Give him the mic.
Al, I was just going to say, there's one thing I think you are uniquely positioned to see, which is...
I, myself.
Yes, indeed, as a Stevens scholar.
Wallace Stevens.
Right.
You have to turn the mic on.
Apologize. That relationship between Ramon Hernandez and Wallace Stevens, and the rage for order, Pale Ramon.
So this is the idea of order. You're referring to the idea of order in Key West.
Right, and there's this ghosting of that as well.
Ghostly demarcations, keener sounds, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Wallace Stevens everywhere. Emily Harnett, what do you think of this poem? Is it too hard? What about its obscurity? I don't actually think of it as hard. When I read the iambic pentameter and realize it's a sonnet, I'm suddenly enabled in the way I am with Claude McKay's poem. Okay, this has got to be critiquing the sonnet. Now I know where to start. Am I right about that? And what other thoughts do you have?
Yeah, I think you're right. This poem does cue you in on how to read it, but I think because it does position itself in explicit relationship to another poem, and a poem that everyone in this course knows really well, which is the Ginsberg. And comparatively, it's a lot more difficult than that one, because we know pretty much how Ginsberg relates to Whitman. For one, the mode of that.
Positively.
Very positively. Positively, whoops, that is my phone ringing. But yeah, whereas this, it doesn't really seem to me, thinking about the Ginsberg, that Ginsberg is asking a question about Whitman. He knows exactly how he feels, and he knows how the culture relates to Whitman, which is sad, but it's something which is stable, and that he's not really confused about. Whereas this is a poet who's asking a question formally and in terms of content that even she doesn't know the answer to, and that necessarily we as readers don't really know the answer to either. We can just rephrase for ourselves the same question that she's asking herself as a poet.
Yeah.
And maybe in that same sense, it's a little bit easier for one white male poet to claim another white male poet as a direct influence and have us all be like, yeah, sure, totally. There you go. You and Whitman, you guys are pals. It makes sense.
No, I think you're right. The race and literary descendants or inheritance, it's very complicated when political strategies are at stake.
Yeah.
And it's not clear how Walt Whitman's political strategy because he had such a love affair with the United States, for better or worse, that it's not clear that complicates Ginsberg's situation, so it can be a very personal situation about marginalization because of his sexual preferences and because of his status as a poet in the 1950s when that poem Supermarket in California is set. But here we have a much more complicated relationship. I mean, for me, the saddest phrase is, or your beaucoup brain, meaning you were a really smart guy, Du Bois. Your big brain, laboring like an earth in Hallelujah's ether. And it's in that state, ducks death's blow. Right? So it's very hard to accuse someone of ducking death's blow when they've laboring they've been laboring like an earth in Hallelujah's ether. I mean, this is it's not simply a criticism. Wow, this has been lots of fun. There are a couple. Let me just quote a couple of Facebook comments and some Twitter comments, and then we will wrap up and say goodbye to everybody. We really appreciate lots of people participating in the comments, and I believe, and Chris and Zach can nod, I believe that a recording will go up almost instantaneously, and I'll send an announcement about that, both on the Facebook site, the Facebook page, a recording. It'll be 90 minutes long, okay. And the YouTube version will be full length, and we will edit them. And I believe that all the comments remain. And is it true that as you watch the 90 minutes, the comments unfold again? Is that really true? On Facebook in real time. So the comments unfold on Facebook in real time. Don't ask me how that's possible. So let me just quote a couple of people. Jim Bumgarner, great session. Al, as always. Bob, sorry, Bob, I always mispronounce your name. Brylowski, who's hanging out with us in San Francisco, talks about another conflict, formalism and structure of the poem, in contrast with the rather disjointed train of consciousness, a cascade of images, yes, in that last poem. Tom Morgan, remember Tom Morgan? Tom, who had the bypass surgery a couple of years ago from Ohio, is back. This has been marvelous. I'd say I can't wait for another year of ModPo to begin. Fantastic. But he says, I think I'll take time to enjoy the summer weather first. Okay, that's fine. Meredith, another great webcast, awesome webcast. Thank you. And over on Twitter, today was Ray Maxwell. Hey, Ray. Today was totally invigorating. Mind is racing. Thanks, y'all. Can't wait for September. And ModPo number 5, it starts on September 10th. We're all going to be back with weekly versions of this super amped up new style webcast. I want to thank Dave Poplar for joining us. Thanks, Dave. Good to see you.
Thanks.
Have a great summer. I know we'll be in touch. Jake Marmer, welcome to the ModPo family. We'll see We'll see you out there in Palo Alto with your students, and sooner as well. Max McKenna in Chicago, thank you, pal, friend, as always.
Thank you, Al.
And Max and Erica are in the midst of creating or recreating the Teacher Resource Center, the TRC. We're really excited to see what you come up with. And anybody who's listening, if you are a teacher, or if you are involved in education, or if you want to be a teacher, or if you're a student in a class and think about pedagogy, please somehow find a way to contact Max and Erica. You can do that in the Facebook page, I believe, the group. There are other ways. And you could always write to modpo@writing.upenn.edu, and we'll get that message to them. And they want people to be involved in the Teacher Resource Center. So thank you. Erica Kaufman, thank you for that and so much else.
Thank you, Al.
Good to see you. Chris Mostaza, welcome to the ModPo team. And Anna Strong. By the way, Anna Strong is our ModPo coordinator. She handles all these things, so yeah, she's great. Emily Harnett has moved back to Philadelphia and is going to be sitting here to my left at all of our webcasts, and I'm really excited. Michael, good to see you. Eric, as always, thank you for your brilliance. And Michaela, we only had one call, but you did a great job on it. Chris Martin, grab that mic, Chris Martin, and come on, grab the mic. Okay, Chris, tell us something about what we're doing here with these webcasts. And also you've been traveling around the United States talking to people about what we're doing. What's significant? What's new? What's going on?
Well, just finding ways to make our webcast even cooler and more interactive, giving you, the students, a stage to actually interact with us. That's where things get really cool, using technology to bring together people throughout various countries all into this one single room. So let us know what you think, if you like it, if you like the interactivity, if you like the Twitter feed. Would really value that feedback. So
great. Thank you. And so Chris Martin and Zach Gardner, applause for them. Thank you, guys. So brilliant. A couple of final notes. Yolanda Wisher's book is called Monk Eats an Afro, A-F-R-O, Monk Eats an Afro, published by Hanging Loose Press. in 2014. And secondly, did we get a Twitter poll?
Oh yeah, got tons
Can you
of them.
tell us about some Twitter polls quickly?
Sure.
Okay.
Keep talking and I'll come back
Okay.
to me.
Well, I think I'd like to put this poem with Chapter 4, the Harlem Renaissance chapter, particularly because of its invocation, not just of Du Bois, but of McKay.
Interesting, they disagree.
But they disagree. They want it in the beats section, don't they?
We got 33% interested in the beats, and the rest are into chapter 9.3.
9.3.
Ooh.
Cool. I'll have to rethink it all.
Yeah.
Any other Twitter polls to mention?
Let's see. So we got one for each. My personal favorite was the Yach Blanc. We gave people options. We said, Yach Blanc, how do you feel? Love it, hate it, what just happened, and hung.
And what?
Hung.
Hung. Somebody, what? Really?
Yeah.
That's cool. Yach Blanc.
So most people, we got 64% of love it for Yach Blanc.
All right, good.
Yay. Miles, we were asking about tone.
Yes, and what did they say about tone?
Tone was, do we have playful or proud, anxious, or something else entirely? Most of us are at something else entirely, so yay.
Okay.
Good for that.
All right, we're going to close with a note from Chris Richards on Twitter. This is the first time that he's joined us. He's tweeting at C_H_Richards. Thanks, ModPo Pen, for a great webcast. The first time I've tuned in. I'm looking forward to the next iteration of the course. Hashtag ModPo Live. This is Al Filreis at the Writers' House at the University of Pennsylvania. Hashtag ModPo Live. Signing off. Thank you all, and we'll see you in September.